We are live.
Fantastic, and thank you, Martha. This is our 36th Google Hangout and Twitter chat on #SalesEU. I'd like to welcome everybody for joining today. Today's guest is the man, the legend in his own lifetime, Brian Fanzo, or Social Fans as we call him. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, and thank you. No legend here, but I'm excited to be here. That's exciting. 35 plus Hangout Twitter chats. That's a lot of work, as I can attest to as well. So I'm honored to be here, and it's 8 a.m. here on Arizona in the Pacific time zone. I know it's later in the afternoon there, so I'll try to keep everybody awake who's ending their day, and hopefully we'll wake up those that are on the Pacific time joining us.
Fantastic. Well, it's 3 p.m. here in the UK, 4 p.m. on Central European time, and I think it's about 11 a.m. on the East Coast as well. So today we are spanning the universe, which is fantastic. Today's topic is strategic social relationship building to boost sales. Deep breath. That's a fantastic title, I have to say. So we've a lot of social, we talk about relationship building, etc. This is a slightly different angle on it because we're talking about the strategy behind it. And as I've seen recently, there's been quite a few LinkedIn posts which have come out in regards to trying to put strategy into our social approach, because a lot of what people talk about in social is really the tactical element and the execution of that as well. And I think, as we were just discussing before you came on, there has been a bit of a change in the attitude towards social media and trying to make it more strategic, so you're goals orientated, etc., rather than being simply creating a lot of noise, is the way I would describe it, and connecting with lots of people. So Brian, tell us about yourself. What's your Twitter handle? I understand you're going to SXSW. Can you tell us all about that as well?
Sure. So Brian Fanzo, I say better known as Social Fans, and I didn't realize it for a long time, but most people don't understand what Social Fans actually stood for or how I created it. So the I, the lowercase I, is because I'm an Apple fanboy, so it's the I for like iWatch, iPod, iPad, and then
iPhone.
iPhone. The social part, of course, because this was a social-focused account, and then my last name being Fanzo, I made a play with fans. So I actually, when I created this account, I had at the time 9 personal Twitter accounts, and I think that's a good example of how Twitter has changed, because that was 2008, and I had one for Pittsburgh sports, that I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, and like the sports. I had one that was focused on only technology. I had one that was about poker, which I like to play poker, and all of those things were kind of how I kind of managed my, I'd say, my strategic Twitter following, or my strategic Twitter accounts. But I've now kind of molded it back down, so I only have 3 accounts, this being my primary one, Social Fans. So I'm the Chief Digital Strategist and partner over at Broadsuite Media Group. We kind of started up just a little less than a year ago. I joined with Daniel Newman to kind of, my focus is really creating media that actually can support and build communities around it. So I have a podcast called Smack Talk, which is SMAC, and the Smack stands for Social, Mobile, Analytics, and Cloud. So I'm a geek to begin with. Computer science was my major in college, and love computers, love technologies, really focused on social business and kind of merging that with traditional social media. And so I also co-host a Hangout Twitter chat called SBiz Hour with the wonderful, amazing Rachel Miller, who I know you guys are familiar with as a Pipeliner CRM chief listener, and that's been one of the coolest experiences for me. Our 1-year anniversary will be coming up either next week or the week after, and the reason that's a great example that how Rachel is the brains behind the operations. I can't remember which day it was, but I'm sure she'll tweet it out and tell me what day it is, because she keeps me organized and on track. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm in Arizona now, proud dad of 3 little girls under 5 years old, so they keep me busy at all times, and I'll be heading to South by Southwest tomorrow, as I'll be on a couple different panels talking about employee advocacy, talking about personal branding, and then on Monday night I'll be talking with IBM and Twitter teams about digital engagement. So I'm excited for that. I've been traveling a lot, just got back from Barcelona for a Mobile World Conference, so excited to be here, and it's 8 a.m. here, so I'm ready to go.
Fantastic. That's great news. Yeah, I have to say the Social Biz Hour chat is a fantastic thing that takes place on a Monday evening here in the UK at 9 p.m. What's the hashtag for that?
So it's SBiz Hour. So SBIZ
SBS.
Hour. Yep. And we do a hangout and Twitter chat just like you guys.
Fantastic. There's some great information on there that does come out, and I'd certainly encourage everybody to head over to that on a Monday evening, 9 p.m. UK time, which is of course 10 p.m. European time as well. Right, okay, so let's begin. Let's talk about strategic social relationships. So we were talking a little bit earlier on about how social media is changing and becoming more strategic. So let's just start with, what is strategic social relationship building?
Sure. So, I think actually, I think I usually kind of caveat anytime I use the word strategic. Some people either have a negative view of that word strategic because it almost sounds like exploiting or having like this ulterior motive. And I would challenge that as actually strategic. It just means you have a set of goals and a plan to reach success. And I think when you think of it that way, it's not me how I'm gonna use somebody to get what I need, but it's social can be a real time suck. We can really, when you get on social media, there's so much going on. You get in a deep hole. All of a sudden, you're in LinkedIn, and then you're 13 blog posts deep, and you don't even know how you got there. And for me, so much of social has changed because social media is really about how do you have these one-to-one conversations. If it's on Twitter, if it's on LinkedIn, if it's on Google+, anywhere you're having it. But how do you have these conversations that ultimately lead to something? So if it's a better relationship with somebody, if it's a connection to be a business partner. And so for me, I think everything that I do, everything that I focus, not only with my clients, but with everything that we build is what are we doing, where are we spending our time, and what is that ultimately getting us? And I think if you don't have a strategic approach to social media, you're probably wasting a lot of your time because, when I talk about strategic relationship building, for me it's, and Rachel Miller, the co-host for me, she does it better than anyone I know, where, we're talking about, hey, who do we want to have as guests on our chat in July? What we start doing is we start listening. We start figuring out what that person's talking about. And really, there's an honest truth of you want to give as much as you get from someone that you're making this ask for. And so I'm a big Gary Vee fan. The book Jab, 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 Right Hook had a big impact on me. And that jab, 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 right hook means you give and you give and you give, and then you set it up to where you've given so much that when you ask for something, the only answer they're going to give is yes, because you've put yourself out there. And so my social philosophy is I use the hashtag #ShowYouCare. And I like to say everything you do on social, if you find a way to make it to where you show you care, nobody's going to go wrong. Nobody's going to say, oh my goodness, you're helping me too much. You care too much on social media. They will say that you sell too much, you're just blasting them with spam, but they won't ever say you're helping me too much, you're caring too much. And I think if you take that philosophy into the strategic relationship building, it'll really leverage and kind of transform your sales conversation because then people want to do business with you. You don't have to convince them that you're authentic and trustworthy, and you'll help them because you've already helped them along the way. And now they just want to they want to enable and work together with you. So I think that's kind of my approach to strategic relationship building.
I think that works. I think that works a great deal. I think that's fantastic. What do you do about those people who there are always takers out there, should we call them, who will turn around and because you're a giving individual and you're helping them, etc. What's the cutoff point where you turn around and say, you know what, it's a one-way street here?
That's a great question, and it's something I would say I don't have the all answer for because I'm one that is slowly figuring that out as well. And I think part of the discovery on social media as of recently is that it takes a lot of work, a lot of effort to build great relationships and spend time on social media. But a lot of people still look for that easy button, or they're looking for that that quick win. And I think what you have to do is you have to focus on I use the term, and I will joke because I will drop a couple hashtags, I already did, but I use screenshot awesomeness. And what I do with that is I always told my team, every time something good happened, take a screenshot of it, take a picture of it on your computer, and put it into a folder. And what that works out really well for in these cases is when something bad happens or someone uses your time or you finally say, okay, yes, I'll get on the phone call, and as soon as you get on the phone call with a person, they're just hard selling you and guilt tripping you into something. What I do is you open up that folder, and all of those wins that you had are that motivation to say, well, this one person just doesn't get it, And it's okay because I've been making this much change. I've been helping this many people. This is the awesomeness that I've created so far, and it kind of allows you to kind of overlook some of the ones that just don't get it yet. And I think one of the big changes is those that aren't doing it right are slowly being weeded out, and they're going to get separated. I like to say the unfollow button or the mute button, or even the the no unfriend button. It's a powerful thing, because if you ruin that relationship, you are now tuned out of my world. So if I unfollow you on Twitter, I don't really care what you're doing on Twitter. I'm not going to see it. And so I really try to teach people that you should strategically and care about, it's almost respecting the news feed of your followers. And if you respect their news feed, that means you're not going to do something that polarizes them and makes them unfollow you, because, I don't worry about, the unfollowers, but I worry about keeping my followers extremely happy. So I'd say it's one of those things. I know Tim McDonald, a good friend of mine, will mention to me every once in a while. He'll always say, like, hey, Brian, remember, you have to keep that log of people that aren't doing it the right way, so that when they ask you again, you don't fall for the trap twice. So I like to think that, I give everybody a chance. I'm a big fan of second chances and helping everyone, but I think that one or two people that either screw you over or take advantage of you, you put that little, that little name there and say, okay, I'm not going to go out of my way to help that person moving forward. And I think together that'll kind of drive the needle. But hopefully that entire philosophy is changing, and really everyone gets the value of building these relationships and really combining and collaborating together.
Yeah, I think it's great. I like the idea of the awesome wall, because that's it's a whole positive energy, positive thinking attitude versus getting bogged down into the negativity of one or two trolls which can be out there.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to question 1. What is the social relationship building, and how can strategic nurturing help to increase sales?
Sure. So, I think we were talking about relationships, and I talked about this with my dad. I have 2 brothers, and he got us into golf very early on, and he said, Brian, so much business is done on the golf course, right? And so we learned golf, and for me that didn't really make sense, because I was like, my dad's a candy salesman, and why do candy sales guys buy candy on the golf course, right? Like that logic doesn't make sense. But my dad, is a mentor and leader in my life, and he's a big fan on, you don't burn bridges, relationships matter. He believes there's nothing more powerful than a handshake. And what social and strategic relationships allow you to do is it allows you to have more handshakes and have that broader audience, so that when you do build, meet these people face to face, or you have that phone call when you're actually talking about the sale, it's actually you already have a relationship with them. So I think, when it comes down to that, is don't think of social as replacing the handshake or replacing the sales pitch, but what it does is it allows you to have more of those and have a more authentic kind of relationship when you are actually making that sell or making that ask. So for me, the nurturing of that, and there's no easy button for building a relationship, and there's no easy button for doing it on social media. I don't care what automation it is. I changed my title from a technology evangelist to a change evangelist, because I think when we embrace the change that you need to in how you're building relationship, how you're doing all these things, the technology and social are just these tools and weapons to allow you to amplify and scale. But if you're not doing the hard work up front, if you're not being authentic, if you're not providing value, I don't care what tool you're using, I don't care what automation you're using, that'll never scale. Because I used this quote a couple weeks ago, and it was funny because it kind of latched on, but if you're crappy offline, you're probably going to be crappy online.
I heard that. Yeah.
And I think we all can attest to that. But if you are really good offline, it still takes a lot of work to be really good online. And I don't think people kind of sometimes mistaken the fact that, hey, I'm really friendly and I'm really do great things offline, and then they automate and spam everybody online. Your digital first impression for all these people that don't know you offline is a spammy, easy button looking person, and if that's not who you are, you need to really work to make sure that who you are offline is who you are online.
Absolutely, I think that's true. I think you're absolutely right. There's so many people who, particularly on LinkedIn these days, where they look at the whole I've connected, and the next thing is their pitch. And you're absolutely right. If that was in a face-to-face situation, they just wouldn't do it, but they use the technology to hide behind effectively, and they don't build a relationship. And then it's a question of, okay, yeah, I'm interested. No, I'm not. There is no relationship. So it's, for me, that comes down to transactional sales, and you're just transplanting that from do you want to buy now in front of somebody versus trying to build up, work out what their problem is, and help them along so you can give them a proper solution.
No, that's exactly right. And I think that also, I'll kind of work with some people in that sense, and they'll give me the examples of when that actually worked, right? When the auto DM or the five, and I always ask that question. Well, for all those times that worked, are they rebuying from you? Are they selling again to you? Because ultimately you want the bigger picture, right? You're building that relationship so they not only continue to buy from you, but so that they're your biggest fan, they're your advocate. They almost do the selling for you. And when you do that quick one-hit, spam auto DM or auto, LinkedIn message somebody, and yes, you got to win. Transitioning that person into that true valuable asset and customer and client is a lot harder than if you do that hard work up front. Because I think that's kind of the mistake we get in. Just because it works once or twice doesn't mean it's right. And I think we have to kind of refocus that idea and build those relationships, provide value first. I think tools, I will never say, for me, I always get the question, how are you doing all this? You're everywhere. I love technology, I love tools, I love data. I use those but I use them on the backside so that I can spend more time engaging, doing things like this. Because there is no automation for, true engagement that builds relationships, and too often I think people assume because they have an automated solution, they no longer have to do the hard work on the engagement. And I would argue you almost have to do more hard work if you're doing more automation, because I think that's the two that you have to balance.
Yeah, I think using a tool to be efficient is fantastic, but it's making you efficient so that you can spend more time on the places that matter. Using it as a substitute doesn't work effectively. And I think you're absolutely right where you turn around and say, how many of these DMs work, etc. Well, the answer is enough for them to automatically automate it and do this en masse would be my answer. And I think the problem then you get into as an individual is you're actually closing yourself out of a job. If you think about the whole sales 2.0 or 2.5 or 3.0 aspect where they're talking about lots of salespeople being made redundant, going out of work because they're no longer needed, it's absolutely true because it's moving it into transactional sales, in which case it can be a machine doing it. You know what? The reality is if it's a pretty girl on that LinkedIn picture or that Twitter picture, etc., more men are going to connect to it. That's just the reality. In which case, if I'm a bloke who's sat here trying to do that job, doesn't work for me. I have to have a value add, and that value add comes from relationship building, I think, and getting out of that person what they really truly need and being able to engage with them properly to build a relationship.
Oh, you're right, and I think that's the answer right there. Is it's part of that element where you're looking at the bigger picture, and you do have to kind of understand. And I think probably one of the hardest things on social media is that people treat it as if it's a handshake and you don't have to train and you don't have to the handshake comes naturally, and just because I have a Twitter account all of a sudden I'm doing social selling. And I would argue it's the other way. It's just like a social CRM tool. It's just you have to continually train, you have to continually refine, read books about what you're doing. I will plug a book from a friend, Jay Baer. It's Utility, and Utility is about how you leverage content to really give and provide value. You're almost giving away a lot of your brand's value in the content, because at the end of the day, the relationship you build and that ultimate your ultimate value is actually built up by all of those things you give. And I think too often people kind of think that social media doesn't need training, doesn't need some of the hard work, and that's where I think our biggest mistake has been over the past couple of years.
Absolutely. I think social has been it's come out of its infancy now and has begun to realize some of the early mistakes it's made. And I think that's fantastic because that means it can actually become a much more serious topic and a serious business methodology effectively. Okay, so let's talk about the second question. If you have a very large network, how can you identify who is the right candidate for relationship nurturing? I think identifying any individual to say that's the person I should be nurturing a relationship with is fairly difficult. How do you do it? Because you have an amazing clout score. Everybody talks about you. So how do you do it?
So I mean, it's a great question, and I will, segue and plug Rachel again on the idea that,
You have a Rachel.
yeah, well, Rachel and I, one of the things that we originally kind of aligned with when we first kind of met on Twitter was we also, as much as we love to engage, and I'm presenting at South by Southwest on digital engagement, I would say something I do way more than I engage, which might shock most people, is I leverage social listening. I listen on social media far more than I actively tweet, and I think that's something that a lot of people forget. And I think the listening aspect is how do you leverage data? How do you understand not only what that person's sharing, but maybe who they're connecting with, what events they're going to. And so for me, so much of that no matter how big your network is, the idea is that you want to listen to understand their pain points, listen to understand who's doing what. And I think it's less about finding out who the right candidate is, but really listening so that you know what the right time is to engage the right people. And I kind of flip it that way. So a lot of what I end up doing is I have lots of lists, I have lots of reminders, I have lots of tools that give me a lot of reports. But when it comes down to it, I really focus hard on listening to what people are doing, and if they have a book coming out, or let's say they're going to an event, simply reaching out and saying, good luck, I hope your flight to Barcelona is a good one. That has so much value, because I didn't say, I hope you have a great day, which anybody can say. I knew that he was going to Barcelona. So you almost build up that little bit of rapport and that authenticity that says, I care enough to go above and beyond. Like, I can't tell you how many times that I get people, automatic DMs on Twitter bothers me all the time, but I'll have people that'll say, they'll have an automatic DM that's sent to me, and it'll say, Brian, it's the automatic one, it'll say, hey, I'm not sure if you're new to Twitter, but I host a Twitter chat. If you want to find out what more of a Twitter chat is, click this link. And to me, that is such an insult, because I say, I'm a huge fan of Twitter chats. I've been doing them for 5+ years. If they would have taken a little bit of time and not sent me that auto DM and known that I did Twitter chats, they could have asked me in a DM, what Twitter chat resources do you have, Brian? I would have sent them to a website, and we would have created a relationship and dialogue. But instead, you almost insult the person by not doing that research up front. And I think, today, everybody's digital footprint is their first impression. And if you're not using that data, if you're not using social listening and really the element of data in social media, you're missing the mark, because the last thing someone wants to be, have done is to almost be insulted by, even on LinkedIn. Just because their LinkedIn profile says, these 3 things, like, I don't ever trust when it says this person has a new job, because LinkedIn has, like, sometimes people change their title or change the date by accident. So what I'll usually do is I'll usually try to find them on another social network or go to their website, and if it says on there, like, hey, I changed my job, hey, I did this, then I'll go back to LinkedIn and actually congratulate them. Because, the last thing you want to do is congratulate them and then say, oh, it must have messed up the date, I don't have a new job, and then you look like the guy that just used the random LinkedIn automation on the side of the, side of the page.
Yeah, I have seen that before, and I've seen somebody be demoted, and then everybody start congratulating them, and the person feeling like they have to explain that this is not good news, and that's just a killer. I think what you're saying there, though, is very much something that nearly all of our guests say, which is, in fact, do your homework first. Listen, do the homework, find out who they are, what they do, etc., and then begin the engagement process as a result of understanding a little bit about them, at least. And that
And I'll even flip the script to the salesperson on that. It's our responsibility today. I don't think there's any excuse for any person, any brand, to not be out there and telling your story, providing your value. So the fact that we can leverage all of this data for our customers and our clients, I can't tell you how many times I flip the script and go, well, what do people know about you? Well, I haven't updated my LinkedIn profile in 3 months. I haven't, and I look at them and say, well, you want to get all this information, you want to build this great relationship, you're not doing your own self any justice by not telling your story and sharing what you're doing, and even creating blogs and things that tell you, like, hey, these are the events I went to, this is some of the information I had. So I think for a salesperson, we also have to put our own hat on and think of it from the customer's perspective. What if our customer is just as good of social listening and customer data looking as I am as the salesperson? What are they finding out about me? Are they finding out that I have a website that I haven't updated since 2008? Or I have a broken, link inside of my LinkedIn bio. All of those type of things. I think when we're talking about this, strategic relationship building and the idea of a digital first impression, it's not just your customers that have a digital first impression. You as a salesperson, you as a brand, you as a CEO, you have one just as much as everyone else. And I argue a lot of times that a CEO doesn't have to be active on social every single day, but they have to have a polished, defined digital footprint, because they're the front door, the face of their brand. And if they're not doing it, that's oftentimes the first impression many people get of a tool, of a brand, and that's a great way to send me somewhere else if your website's outdated. And I do that with everybody. I'm sure you guys as well. If someone sends me a message, I'm like, I might be interested. If I go click on a link or go do a little bit of research and something is not updated, I ask myself, if they don't have the time to update their digital footprint, why should I make the time for them? And I think you have to kind of think of it that way and kind of take that approach to everything you're doing on social.
Particularly in your area, I could certainly see that. And I think you're right, particularly with CEOs and leadership teams, because of course they're always listed on the website. Then they should have, if they're already listed and they're out there and they're the public face of the company, and if they can't be bothered to have an updated and good digital presence, then of course the question then becomes, what's the culture like within that organization? Is that really an organization I want to do business with? And particularly if you're talking about our industries, which is technology-led, etc., you want them to be forward-thinking and innovative in their approach, at least. So if they don't, then it's a bit of a red flag for myself as well. Having said that, though, I'm desperately going to get off after this and check my LinkedIn profile for bad links, just make sure it all works properly.
Love it. And I tell you what, I also argue a lot of times that you usually don't realize that something's broken or not working unless somebody tells you. And there's some great people on social media that do a great job of not calling you out, but like either doing it on the side. Rachel's another one that she always coaches me on the idea. She's always like, well, they don't know that they shouldn't send that auto DM or shouldn't have sent that link if you don't tell them, and she always coaches them back on it. And sometimes I do that, but I would say part of it comes into the fact is you need a good group of people around you as well that can kind of checks and balance and say, hey Brian, I was on your website and your Pinterest link doesn't work.
Doesn't work anymore.
For me it's like I don't go to my own website and click my Pinterest link, but having that group of people kind of helps you kind of stay up to date as well.
But it becomes self-validating, doesn't it? So then your community around you turn around and keep everybody in your group up to date, and you just simply start looking out for each other, which I think is a great way of giving. I always turn around when I talk to my prospects, which I think is a great thing as a salesperson to be able to do, is to turn around, check their website out first so you understand what they do, etc. And if there's a mistake on it, then I turn around to the person and say, hi, I'm calling about XYZ, but before I start talking to you about my product, can I just say I've been on your website and you've got this problem, this typo mistake, or this link doesn't work? Because then it's an automatic, for me, it disarms them from thinking, oh, salesperson, you're going to pitch me into oh, okay, that's helpful, thank you, that's great. I'll give you 2 minutes, 5 minutes of my time because you've turned around and given something to me, and I think that's a fantastic way of doing it.
Sorry about that. I had the Arizona sun coming in. I was getting blurred out on the TV screen, so now I'm not as blurred.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. Engagement is strongly associated with relationship building. What do successful salespeople do to ensure both?
Well, I think it's an interesting one when we're talking about, kind of mapping that path and doing both of them strategically, right? So you want to spend your time where you can provide the most value, and that's why I will argue all the time that automation is not bad. People using automation in a bad way is bad, right? And thinking that because I have an automated tool, oh my goodness, I spend this amount of money, I no longer have to spend the time. And I think when it comes down to this engagement element is, if you can focus your engagement, the reason I love Twitter chats, the reason I love events like we're doing today is, you don't have to follow every person on this topic, but you can follow this hashtag and actively engage with people that are active at the same time you are. Because when you first get on Twitter, you post something out there, and then you sit there waiting for your notification for someone to finally retweet you or get back. And a lot of times, we're all in different time zones, we're all in different worlds of ways that we engage. And when you find things like Twitter chats, or you find things like different hangouts that exist, it gives you those times where you can find people that are engaged around a topic. And not necessarily you have to follow them, but you all kind of share a same focus or passion around a similar topic. I think that's important. And when we're talking about engagement and that relationship building. I use hashtags. I talked about social listening, and maybe I should clarify the social listening aspect. Is like, lots of people use Hootsuite. I'm a big fan of Hootsuite as well, but inside of Hootsuite, you can set up these different columns, and TweetDeck is the same way. But on Twitter, you can have different hashtags, different phrases. You can even have, like, for me, I have my first name and last name, because so many people will put @Brian Fanzo or put Brian Fanzo in something because they don't know of my Twitter handle being iSocialFans, which is part of my personal brand coaching. As I tell people, don't do what Brian did in building up a rapport around his name. I often not recommend them using first name, last name, but like being able to listen for that kind of things, so that, I mean, you'll be amazed how many times someone would use the wrong Twitter handle for me. I'll reply and say, thanks so much for sharing, just so you know this is my Twitter handle. The amount of, oh my goodness, thank you so much, I can't believe you caught that, and it kind of builds a conversation. And they look at me like I am a master of all of these things. And all I did was put my first name, last name in parentheses inside of a tool. And so that tool isn't giving me an easy button, but it allows me to see those things and actively engage with value. I don't have to go around and search the world to kind of do all of these things. I think that's where this whole engagement element and strategic relationship building, because you leverage tools and data for both of them, but you don't get to use a tool to really do the true active engagement. And I know someone on Twitter, and I love pulling in the Twitter stuff as well. And I think someone asked, when you have 50,000 followers, 100,000 followers, it probably doesn't scale. And I would argue, if you follow Ted Rubin, @Ted Rubin, Ted Rubin replies with a smiley face or a thank you to every single person that messages him or replies to him. Sure. Gary Vaynerchuk, there's a blog went out by the company Twitterland yesterday, the top 50 friendliest social media influencers, and Gary Vaynerchuk was at the top. I think Ted Rubin was at number 5. They have millions of followers, hundreds of thousands of followers, and they're using tools and all of these, but they're not airmail. They're not using an easy button for engagement. They're still taking the time out to say the thank you, to share the smiley face. And the reason that they're the friendliest social media influencers, and the reason they're the most successful, it's not a disconnect, right? I use my hashtag being show you care. Those are the examples. I mean, they're the leaders and mentors in my world that kind of influence me to say, if they have time to do that, if they're running their own company, and this goes across the board. I would say, even if you look at someone like a Mark Cuban or Richard Branson, oftentimes if you're retweeting it or you're messaging, not just hitting retweet because that's the easy button, but if you're actually like engaging back with them, if they ask a question like, oh, anybody had any recent problems on Virgin Airlines? I've seen multiple people where he had like 40 people replied back with like different problems. He was replying to each one of them. Thank you for your response. Interesting, I hadn't heard of that. And he doesn't have to do that. And if Richard Branson can take the time to do that, what's your excuse for not doing it? I think there isn't really an excuse because you have a certain number of followers. And I'd also argue that a lot of times the more followers you have, the more focused your engagement has to be. And that kind of is one of the things you kind of have to take as an approach moving forward.
I think that's absolutely true. I think the key aspect there is, as you've said, one is the retweet button, and I use that all the time, is the easy option. So less retweeting, more great article, like it, and sharing it from that perspective, just to build a little bit more into the engagement. And if you can, turn around and engage directly and say something to the person rather than just retweeting. I think the other aspect you mentioned there is leveraging the technology correctly. So using something like Hootsuite or TweetDeck or whatever it happens to be to turn around and pull off the list of people who've got your Twitter tag wrong, basically. Rather than just replying to them saying, oh, by the way, the correct one is this. And then, of course, particularly with somebody with your level of influence, is like, oh my God, Brian responded to me, which is fantastic, Phil, particularly if you're talking about people who care about clout. Now, clout is one of those things where, of course, it's a measure. There are only so many measures out there. Try not to get too hung up on it, etc. But you've got a high social clout score. So people do look at that and they want to achieve your level of clout hierarchy, effectively. Obviously, the education as well, it's more than just a clout score. but because you're engaging with them, I think that's fantastic, and that's a great way to show of how to build that clout score. Is in fact, it's not the clout score by itself that you need to be looking at, it's the engagement levels you're looking to try and do, and that is just a byproduct of what's going on. It's not the goal, because the goal is the engagement. Well, the goal isn't even the engagement. The goal is to generate more revenue or whatever it happens to be, and the tactic for achieving that is to be more engaged with people.
And I think we all have had that aha moment on Twitter or on social media where that one person retweeted you or followed you or replied back. And I would argue the amount of influence, the amount of clout score you have, doesn't really create that aha moment. If you have 1,000 followers and someone just started with 50 followers and you reply back to them, that's an aha moment for them. So don't assume because you don't have 50,000, 100,000 followers that you engaging back with somebody isn't of value to them. And I always make the argument that you only need one follower on Twitter to make a difference. Because if you affect that one person, and that one person can then either go affect other people, I think that's that true essence. So clout score, it's an interesting discussion. And for me, a lot of what I talk about from a clout score perspective is that it's just one measurement, like you said. And I think people ask, hey, Brian, how did you get your high clout score? And I reply back, show you care. I worked really hard at doing things to show that I cared. It's active engagement. But the clout score wasn't my goal. I mean, ultimately, for me, the goal was building relationships that led to an in-real-life hug that allowed me to build a partnership. If it's I've connected with people to do things like Social Business Hour with Rachel. Then I have business partners that relationships started online. I have tons of clients that knew me for 2 or 3 years on social media, and now they are paying customers of mine. And I think that's kind of those things that you have to kind of focus on. It's not the number of followers equals this you don't have to have 20,000 followers to make somebody else's day when you retweet them. So many times it can just be a simple thing like, hey, I saw you said this morning you're having a bad day. I noticed this afternoon your tweets are much more happy. That's exciting. Hopefully everything's turned around.
Hopefully it's going good.
That is just it shows that you're invested a little bit more than just seeing one tweet that someone says rough day and say that sucks when you had no idea that maybe their mom passed away, right? The idea
Absolutely.
Now is you have to go a little bit above and beyond. And I love the retweet button and the favorite button, but think of it this way: people are following you for you, and that means you need to add your own insight, add your own value, share the content that you enjoy. And what I mean by that is if an article that I read was shared by somebody, and let's say Eric shares an article that I love, I'm going to retweet Eric, but I'm also going to put that article in there, and I'll put my own insight in there because my community wants to hear from me. They're following me. They're not following an RSS feed, which they can follow one. And I think sometimes we kind of forget that, and we just say, oh, that article was great, retweet. And I always ask, well, what value did that provide for your customers, your client? Because now they just know that you just hit one button. And too often people think by hitting that button, people know what that means. And I think we have to sometimes put ourselves back in that old school mentality of remembering when you were a newbie, remembering when you didn't even know what a clout score was. If you engage people without ever putting yourself on that hierarchy, that's when you can really truly have value on social media.
Absolutely. So my dog's just going berserk in the background for a second there. How can salespeople let their connections know that they care deeply about their success?
So I think that what it comes down to is almost building like a in sales we understand building a customer persona and building a customer's path to purchase. But you also almost have to build up their information and path to relationship. And what I mean by that is a lot of times it's taking all these small steps and adding them up over time. I say screenshot awesomeness, but I also screenshot the initial engagement, times when someone shared my content, so that whenever I am making that conversation, it's not just saying the most recent thing that happened. It's about using all of these things to build up that deep sense of, hey, I care a lot more than just hitting Googling your name and realizing that you're keynoting at South by Southwest, right? The difference between that is if someone takes the time and says, hey, Brian, I realized that you were, 3 weeks ago you were in Vegas at an IBM conference, you were at Barcelona, and you're going to South by Southwest this week. Man, that travel schedule must be tough. How are you handling it? that is a lot more valuable to me than someone saying, oh, you're going to Austin this week, hope everything's good. Like, like there's just a deeper sense there, and I think what that really requires is for you to actually care, and it takes more than
Yeah.
and it doesn't take a whole day, because we all don't have time to sit there on Twitter, on social media, and do all of this research. But when you leverage tools, when you embrace a social CRM, if you I mean, for me, even personally, before I even was working with clients and customers, so much of what I did, and I use this a lot, is I always try to remember where certain people, clients, customers, where their preferred social media engagement is. Some people love, LinkedIn Messenger. Some people like Twitter DM. I do a lot of business on Facebook Messenger, as surprising as that is. And and now there's tools like Meerkat and all these other things that are coming out, where for me it's almost more important to know where they like to engage as much as where they engage all the time. Because if there's a certain person, like I'll use Ted Rubin as a great example. Ted Rubin and I go on Twitter all day, every day, back and forth. But if I want to go and, Ted is a mentor, and reach out to Ted and say, hey, Ted, I need your favor, I'm Facebook messaging him, because that's where his primary piece is. Let's say Brian Kramer, another friend of mine. Brian Kramer, I'm going to just simply public tweet out and say, hey, Brian, check your text message. I just texted you. And
Yeah.
because I know that this is where these two people prefer to engage, the likelihood of them engaging me back and kind of creating that dialogue is much higher. And so it's not really that creepy, like I have to stalk somebody to know all this information, but it's really, how can you make their lives easier, and how can you engage with them how they prefer being engaged? I'm someone that, I openly admit that the call button on my iPhone is hidden. I don't make very many outbound calls, but I love Google Hangouts. I love video chats. I love doing, I love social media, of course. So for a lot of people, I will tell them, if you email me, I'll get to it. If you tweet at me, I will reply to you immediately. And that is my own personal one. It's not like that for everybody. And I think you have to really, that strategic element on these connections is, it's not like the old days, like I have a business card, this is my connection. I would almost argue, flip on the back of the business card and put on there, did I engage this person on Twitter before? Am I connected with them on LinkedIn? And put a star next to the platform that they like to engage with the most. And it's pretty easy to figure out where they like to engage in the most. Just look at their recent activity on all of their different platforms. If anybody, I love to be a little bit of everywhere, but if you jumped on Tumblr, I'm not very big on Tumblr, and I don't use Tumblr all the time. So if you reached out to me on Tumblr, the chance of getting a reply to me in the next week is probably, it's going to be the end of the week. But if you reached out to me on Twitter, you're going to get a reply in the next hour. And I think that's kind of that whole element here, where you have to understand your connections and do a little bit more of a deeper research.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and that's very easy to work out as well. All you have to do is look at the social streams and see where they are in fact talking and engaging, because they don't always turn around and talk themselves. So it's, you need to make sure the engagement is there. And I think certainly using tools as well, if you take it outside the social context, you can turn around and use things like Yesware and HubSpot's signals as well, which can tell you if they're reading emails straight away as well, because that'll give you a clue. If they're reading it straight away, they've got it, they've looked at it, even if they don't engage back. And I think, work out what communication method, whether it's the phone, whether it's in person, video chats, etc. Work out which one's important to the person you're trying to engage with.
Yeah, and I think also don't mistake that something going above and beyond, and that's kind of my show you care element, don't mistake that for not being valuable even in the social community. Because I mean, I'll give a mad shout out and love to Buffer. I'm a huge Buffer fan. Buffer is a social, they're a social tool. They have built a great community. But you know how many times they've sent me nice handwritten notes just saying thank you? I mean, they already had me as a fan. They already have me as, a lot of times I say, like, I'm their poster boy of, love for Buffer. But when they do things like this, this makes me talk about them in a show that wasn't, and those are little. I mean, and it doesn't have to be just a social company. I can tell you, I got a bag full of chocolates in the mail, and in the box it said, "We know you were in the UK, and they have great chocolates. Hopefully you didn't miss out on them. If you did, here's a basket full of chocolates." And it's from a company that I hadn't even followed yet on social media, but they had kind of built up that relationship, and I was like beyond impressed to the point where I took a picture, I tweeted it. I posted it on my social media, and then I reached out to them directly and said, "How can we work together?" Like that's a great example of a strategic relationship. I hadn't even realized who they were yet. They leveraged the listening aspect. engaged and gave something of value to me, even offline, to the point where I went online and want to promote and share and say, hey, thank you for kind of going above and beyond. So I think that's important because, even in this day of work from home and all these things, so I often hear people say, well, you work from home, that means you don't like to go to networking events and meet people in person. And I'm like, where would you get that idea from? Just because I like to work from home doesn't mean that we don't love networking events or we don't like a personal handwritten note. So, and especially in the sales element, I mean, if everybody is using email marketing, how do you stand out from the noise? How do you separate yourself? Send that nice handwritten note. Even if it's not a handwritten note, like I'll even appreciate people that are, someone posts on their account and they've written on their whiteboard, and on their whiteboard it says, like, make sure to wish Brian a happy birthday tomorrow. Like, dude, and you don't even have to be me, but I think people, when you make it known that you want to build this relationship and you care even more so than they will end up caring for you, I mean, it's almost an easy no-brainer, and I think that's why I'm so passionate about it, because I know it works. I am proof. I've seen it work more times than not, and I think we just have to invest in it from that standpoint.
Okay, so my key takeaway from this is actually that you've managed to get free chocolates from the UK, and I haven't, so I need to know who the organisation is.
That's great. No, I love that, and I will. I definitely should give them a plug because they did definitely step up their game. So I will make sure to share out the Twitter handle and stuff out there for
fantastic,
because it was great.
We have a question from Eric. Brian, do you have any advice for engaging with lazy or unfrequently active users?
Ooh, I love that. So, the idea of the lurker, and actually the funny part about that company that I was just talking about that sent me chocolates, their Twitter handle is I love speed share, and they just actually favorited 2 of the tweets that I sent out for the SalesEU hashtag, so it worked out great. It popped up. I don't know if they were listening or watching, but they are the ones that kind of reached out to me and sent the chocolates, so I thought that was great. It was actually chocolates and a toothbrush, so it was interesting on that side. But back to Eric's question, I saw it come through on Twitter. I love this question because so much of social media, I mean, I talk fast, I tweet faster, I talk all the time, but so many people on Twitter and on social, Twitter more so than anything else, are great lurkers. They're great listeners. They sit in the background. How many people are on this chat that are not going to send one tweet, but they're gaining value? And the key for that is, how do you bring them out of the woodworks? How do you kind of almost give them a reason to engage? And I think part of that is when you personalize it. I know Barb Giamonico had jumped in there, and big fan of Barb. I love how Barb is always very raw and real, and she just shares who she is and kind of, she almost makes you want to engage and love what she does. And I'm a big fan of people that do that. And I think when you personalize your conversations, personalize what you're sharing, I think that's when these people that are just the lurkers and the listeners feel comfortable enough to kind of jump out and say hello or do something. And there's also lots of signs. I can tell you, for me, every person that favorites one of my tweets, I have a tool that actually automatically pulls them into a separate Twitter list. And what I end up doing is I go back and look at that, and if someone's favorited 5 or 6 of my tweets over the last month, they apparently like what I'm sharing. And if I'm not following them yet, I follow them ahead of time, reach out to them and say, hey, just so you guys know, I saw that you like my content. Hopefully you're enjoying this. Is there anything I can do to help you? And they might not have ever tweeted at me, but because they give me these little signals, these little, it's like when I was a poker player and I love nonverbal cues, right? And so when someone sits back on their back and they put their feet up, they no longer are interested in you. But if someone all of a sudden puts their feet underneath them and they're sitting up because they're really attentively listening, that's when you jump on it. And I think that's when you leverage these little things of this lurking aspect. Or maybe someone shared your content on LinkedIn, but they've never shared anything for you on Twitter. Maybe reach out to them on Twitter. Like, I think I'm a big fan of kind of cross-social collaboration. So if you're on one network and engaging with them, go on to the other network. You'll kind of see, for me, I don't ever really wish someone a happy birthday on Facebook because Facebook makes it too easy. What I end up doing is when Facebook gives me that pop-up and says, these are the 3 people's birthdays, I go, what other network am I engaging them on? I'm going to wish them happy birthday there so that they know I didn't just see the thing and hit say happy birthday to Eric. I'm going to actually go on there and say, hey, Eric, happy birthday. I hope you have a great one with you and your kids. And I think that little bit of things kind of brings people out of the work, shows that, the lurkers and those that you're kind of going above and beyond. But it's a great question because I think we still have to get better at that. We have to really get better at listening to those that oftentimes aren't trying to be heard, because the loudest people are no longer the ones that are the most right. I think that's kind of this millennial mindset where we want to give everybody a voice. I want to give everybody a chance to tell their story, and oftentimes we really do have to kind of go a little bit further to get those people to kind of start sharing.
No, I think that's true. I think you can make that easy as well, and by engaging them rather than necessarily waiting for them to engage with you is a critical aspect of that. And yeah, it may be difficult at times, but yeah, if you make it easy for them, they will engage at some point. And you know, if they don't engage, just might not be the right time.
Well, and I think that comes with every. You know, we had Julio on from on our social business SBiz hour, and he was talking about it not being social selling. He was calling it social advocacy, which really tugged at my heartstrings because I'm a big proponent of employee advocacy. And social advocacy, employee advocacy, it doesn't give you an excuse to not do something. Like it doesn't mean just because you have your employee's Twitter account that you can just spam out all of your brand crap out of their account. But what it does kind of give you is if you make it easy for them to share great content and easy for them by training them, it's powerful. And I think everything you do, think of it that way. I like that kind of essence of, and you kind of hit it home, Richard. If we make it easy for others to promote what we're doing, share what we're doing, engage with us, they're so much more likely to do that because we're all busy. We all only have 24 hours a day. No matter what job we have, no matter who you are, we only have 24 hours. And I think that aspect of making it easy on them to kind of take that next step is important. Absolutely.
And the next question is, of course, what are some social relationship tactics that you would recommend? I think we've really just covered that one already because we've got some great tactics there, what we've just talked about. Cross-pollinate, go across the networks. Don't necessarily do the easy stuff. Make it the extra step and make it easy for them to engage. Your tactic of they've liked your favorited 5 different things, fantastic. You know, then it's a reason to engage with them to try and draw them out to engage with you.
You hit it home. I'm ready. Let's jump to the next one.
Cool. What are some of the great tips to build social relationships with new and relevant prospects and customers?
I think that we all kind of think about the first impression as being super important. So a great thing not to do is to don't auto DM them. And I kind of get on that soapbox of this automated message. I'm actually okay with automated messages once the relationship's almost built. Like I love email marketing. I sign up for a lot of great email marketing. Gary Vaynerchuk sends me an email every time he posts a new video, and like the reason that I don't delete that or unfollow or unsubscribe or turn it into spam is because he's already proven that the value is there. So yeah. I think when you think about these automated messages and automated things and automated elements, once you've built that relationship and have that rapport and that value, then you can kind of flip that little bit more of that automated script because you've already kind of built that authentic relationship. And I would argue you don't flip it all the way on. You don't spam them because the last thing you want to do is turn a fan into someone that is kind of muting you out. But I think one of the other things, one of my tips for the new people is remember what it was like to be new on social media or new in this game. I think too often we assume, and I'm guilty of it as everyone, is I just assume, I'll say all the times, well, you're on Twitter, you should be on a Twitter chat. Well, has anybody tried to do Twitter chats on a native Twitter client, just going to twitter.com and putting the hashtag in there? It's pretty painful because it doesn't auto-refresh, the noises are everywhere, you see questions and answers, and it's not easy. So take a step back and remember, what was it like when I first got on there? So suggest people for them to follow, and don't just do a follow Friday where you put a brick of people in there. Put follow Friday, put 3 people, and give people a reason to follow these people. These people are awesome social sellers in the UK. Like Timothy Hughes, Mick Adams is in the chat. Like there's lots of. So if someone in the UK was a new follower of mine and I wanted to help them out, I wouldn't just give them a brick of social sellers. I would say, hey, these are some great people. Here's Pipeliner CRM. They're doing great things in this space. Like, and what you do there is you're almost making it easy, but you're kind of giving them baby steps along the way. Because I can tell you, if you don't remember what it's like to have a new Twitter account, Twitter accounts are free. Go set up a new one and try to start building a following and try to start doing things on a social platform again without having 1,000 followers. It's hard. It's a lot of work. And I think if you put yourself in their shoes, you can almost kind of understand how to take those baby steps with the newbies or a new relationship.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Oh no, hey, work calls. That's the thing. My daughters are in the other room on spring break, so hopefully you're not hearing them in the background.
This is where we find it's our CEO, Nicholas Curling. I've just got a quick question for Brian. Can he answer this one?
Yeah, I say bring it. Actually, Nicholas said we had tweeted back and forth the other day, so I love the engagement.
Excellent.
We have a question. We have a question from James. What do you think about popular brands that don't engage on their social channels with their fan base?
Oh, James. Thanks. James is a great social follow. Check him out. He does a great job of supporting, sharing content. He's a great guy out there. And James, I have an open invitation for Tim Cook on Apple to reach out to me and let me help Apple be better at socially engaging. And I think that's probably the best example for me is probably Apple does probably more social listening than we would have ever realized probably, and maybe more than they want to ever expose. But that's a great point. A lot of great big brands already have that kind of cult following. But I would say just because Apple can do it doesn't mean Coca-Cola should do it, right? And I think when it comes down to this element of like the brand, I think all brands should have a social presence. I think all brands should tell their story. I mean, there's no one really better to tell the brand story than the brand. And if you're not active on social, you're letting everyone else tell the story for you. And if you aren't very good brand or you mess up, those things are difficult. And I would use Target as an example, right? Target had a cybersecurity issue, where they had some things exposed. If Target had spent their time building relationships with their community and humanizing that brand relationship, when that mistake happened, they wouldn't have got buried like they did on social media, because people would have kind of almost had like that compassion for them and said, man, stuff like that happens, let's give them another shot. But if they're just like a logo and they're talking down at you, and even if they're on social, they only spam stuff out, why would you even give them compassion or show you care in that aspect? So for me, I think some of these big brands just don't get it yet, and I think that's going to take a little bit of time for us to change that mentality. But I mean, you look at like a brand like Converse shoes. I like Chuck Taylors. I collect Converse and Chuck Taylors. Their Instagram account makes me want to buy a new pair of shoes almost every day, and they don't have to do that, right? They have a huge company, they have a huge brand, and Dunkin' Donuts is another one. Dunkin' Donuts takes pictures of an iced coffee on a hot day, and I will drive by 3 Starbucks to get that Dunkin' Donuts. And that, to me, is an ROI they probably can't measure, but that's a big brand kind of going out there and kind of understanding what their community wants. So if you work at a big brand, it starts by teaching change and leading change. Don't tell them that they need to be on social media. Prove to it. Show other brands that are doing it well. If you don't have a CEO that's on social very well, go in your industry and find other CEOs in your industry that have a great social CEO. Leverage what matters there. And I think, hopefully these brands will get it. Maybe Tim Cook will take me up one day and come back to me and say, hey, Brian, let's talk about social strategy for Apple.
Let's do it. Yeah.
They have a great brand. It'd be cool if they did that for sure.
Yeah. I think we'd all kind of like that call from somebody like Tim Cook, isn't it? That would be absolutely fantastic.
Very much so.
We've only got a few minutes, so let's move on to question 7 quickly. How much time during the week should a salesperson invest in social relationship building? It's a difficult question, I think, that one, because it kind of depends, really, doesn't it?
And I'm not a big fan of the first hour of your day. You have to be on social media, because I also kind of like put it into how do you manage email, because there's all these disruptions and notifications. So for me, instead of saying how much time, I would kind of flip it the other way and say, what time in your day can you maximize that time to actually do some social engagement? When you're sitting in a doctor's office, do you have your Twitter accounts on your phone to where you can reply a couple thank yous, a couple those elements? When you're for me, a lot of what I end up doing, and this will surprise a majority of people, is almost a majority of my engagement, a majority of my conversations happen on my mobile device. And the reason that is because I'm doing something else. If you're on the train, if you're on the airplane, if you're and even almost those taking advantage of those times make it so that you don't have to sit there an hour and reply to all of these things. And I think that's kind of a mistake people will make, is it's always all on or all off. And for me, it's about tweaking my notifications. And so like I have my notifications set up on my devices where if someone's on my VIP list or my priority list and they tweet at me or message me, I'll get a notification about it. But if someone's not, it's not going to interrupt my day, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to get to them. And that's kind of my strategic approach to that like notification social world, because you do kind of have to sometimes decide if this is the best time or this is the best time of your of your day, if 1 hour sitting down on Twitter is the best part of your day, I would question what the rest of the things you're doing. Because I'd rather you spend 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at lunch, 20 minutes before you leave the office, because you know you're not doing anything from 4:40 to 5 o'clock when you're just watching the clock. Why not throw it up then? I think that's more important than anything else.
Yeah, I think there's naturally in any day there's quite a bit of downtime where you're waiting for something to happen, whatever that happens to be, waiting for people to join a conference call, waiting for the GoToMeeting to start, whatever it happens to be, and that's particularly when you've got a mobile device. Twitter is particularly good at that, I think, where the notifications come in and then you can reply to it. It's not quite real time, but it becomes almost real time, because in every hour there is something which requires you to wait just a couple of minutes, and that's all it really takes. And if you do it throughout the day, it is only 2 minutes at each and every stage.
And oftentimes for me, people always say, even on customer service, like, oh my gosh, I have to reply in real time. You don't have to have the answer in real time. They just want to know you're listening. So if you reply back, you'll see a lot of times I'll reply back and say, hey, no problem, I have no problem getting you that. When I get back to my computer or later on today, I'll make sure to get you that link, or let's set up and I'll get you my email later on. But I didn't wait, 8 hours to reply back initially. I reply back and say, I hear you, it's on my radar, this is what I have to get. And that means more than, because nothing frustrates someone else, especially airlines. You tweeted at airlines and you have to wait 8 hours for the reply. If they would have replied immediately and said, I have no idea why that's happened to you, sir, but I will get to the bottom of that, that takes the pressure off me. I'm like, okay, they at least heard me. And too often people make that mistake that, oh my gosh, it has to be real time. No, you don't have to know all the answers, but they do want to know that they're heard, and that kind of gives you, the buy-in to take some more time.
Absolutely. From a customer service perspective, I've always taught people, and this is using any technology, whether it's email, on the telephone, one-to-one in front of them, what you need to do is take ownership. And if somebody feels that you've taken the ownership and that they trust you and you've got control and you're going to turn around and action it, it doesn't have to be immediate, but they have to know that they've been heard and you've taken ownership, and you retain that ownership until it's resolved. So ideally there's only one point of contact, or you hand over ownership at some point to somebody else. But it's that degree of ownership that really matters.
I could agree more, and I'd say my last kind of, I know we're wrapping up the time. When you're on social, I think it's more important to be social than just do social. Yeah. So instead of figuring out what time you have to spend on social, figure out who you can provide value with, how you can be social with them, share your story. And I think that's when the time thing gets a lot less sticky, because now you can just jump in there and really be social, because that's what people are looking for on social media, not for you just to check a checkbox and say, I put my 1 hour in on social media today.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, and it's about, particularly in the sales arena, it's always about measuring. And the reality there is I can make 80 calls a day, but if I don't get an appointment from one, which is the measure often for people doing telephone calls, then it's 80 wasted calls. If I spend 80 tweets and I still manage to get one type of engagement which is going to lead to something, so my goal of revenue is going to be met at some point, it's the same stuff, it's just a different technology. And I think that's the way to look at it, rather than segmenting it and saying X number of calls per day. If it's moving the ball forward to generate that revenue from a sales perspective, then it's a good time to spend, regardless of the amount of time.
Agree. You don't take someone to happy hour and have a calculated amount of drinks that you buy that will lead to a sell. You shouldn't have that same approach on social media either.
You'll have 2.3 drinks, yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time, Brian. We have gone slightly over, so Martha is going to be very, very annoyed with me, and I'm going to get slapped after this show. But thank you very much for your time. That has been absolutely inspirational, and thank you very much for your time. It's great to have you on the show. I'm a huge fan, and thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you guys. Thank you, guys. I think it's great. I love connecting. This is the power of social, because it's a global family of people that we are able to engage with and talk digital eyeballs to digital eyeballs. So thanks so much for having me, and keep on doing the great stuff that you guys are doing. I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing over at Pipeliner.
Bye.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Cheers.